with me, and you'll see that I live in a world that don't give a fuck, bitch.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your man, Fat Man Buddha, and we are here on July 4th, the Freemason holiday. And we are here to continue to talk about reparations and segregation. Today, we're going to be covering the usurpance of our education. In other words, how we lost the right to teach ourselves. Um, Today, I decided to drop this video today because it just seems so appropriate because everybody thinks that July 4th is when we gained our independence, but if you look up history, it says that that the Americas gained their independence on September 3rd. So how is that even how did it even transfer to July 4th? We have a very special video today. It is by none other than the great Dr. Phil Valentine, the teacher of metaphysics. And I hope that everyone's having a good day. I hope that everyone feels relieved. I hope everyone is in a good mood, man, because we are here to take back our nation. But before we can truly say that we are prepared for reparations and segregation, we must truly understand what that means. For us to say that we want reparations, that means that we must segregate. And why must we segregate? It's because we need our own schools, we need our own hospitals, we need our own food supplies, we need our own military, and most importantly, the most important thing of all, we need our own governments. We must have all 5 out of the 7 things that are essential for us to truly reclaim ourselves as a nation so that when we do receive our reparations, we can have a united front so that we can segregate permanently from the invading Nazi forces. So, without further ado, without nothing else to say, let's listen to the great Phil Valentine.
I'm not sure. Am I on?
Yes, sir.
I am. I'm on. Okay. It's on, huh? Well, give thanks and praises. And I want to give thanks to the grassroots brothers and sisters for inviting me here. I'd like to preface my talk by saying, or at least saying a few words that has been inspired by a particular circumstance that took place last week. Now, all of you who know me and know the many years that I have been discoursing with my community and interfacing with my community, that when I do speak, I make sure that whatever subjects I speak on, I would give you points of reference, books and authors that you can go and check for yourself. And my tapes will bear me out when I say that I will tell and give the proper information to anyone because I don't own the information. Now, I am prefacing this particular talk with love and respect. But because of what happened last week, it's necessary for me to say this. I am not now, nor have I ever been, a disciple, a student, or a prognosticator of the works or teachings of Dr. Malachi York. I must get that clear to the younger brothers and sisters, especially who don't know who I am. Because a few times in the past, a lot of them who come, who are just now getting on the path, just now awakening, don't understand the disciplines of research and what it takes for one who dedicates themselves to finding out the information no matter where it may lie. And most of the information that I've been speaking on for the last 20 years is information that is buried deep, purposefully, so that we as a people may not find the missing ingredient that connects us to the higher parts of ourselves. I am a researcher, metaphysician, and as such, I am a decoder. So I can tell you of about 3 or 4 of the top decoders that are with us, one of them being Bobby Hemmett, and he has no compunctions about telling you where his information is being touched upon or taken from, because he is using it that way as a result of the fact that most of our information is being disseminated through the Caucasoid, but with the missing ingredient. And what is that missing ingredient? Us. So we are interpreters / decoders of what it is that the dominant quote-unquote society is feeding us through the so-called New Age paradigm. Other decoders are Steve Coakley, Brother Dr. Delbert Blair. These are master decoders, ones who have helped us to sift through all of the BS and then give us the needs or what we need of that missing ingredient. So I'm not really focusing it on those of us who have been on this journey for a long time. I'm actually putting this on tape now because I'm sure that this tape will be disseminated amongst the community. And I said this because it dawned on me after the incident that took place at Long Island University last week, and we're here, what's the date today? December 7th. Last week, Friday, it took place, and there are members of the circle or the students of Dr. York that I meet every now and then in my lectures, and because of the subject matter that I speak on, they think that the subject matter originates with Dr. Malachi York, and it doesn't. I tell them where they may go directly to find that material. Now that sets a confusion, a paradigm of confusion and a confusion premise. If information is only being given from the ingredient only and not letting the brothers and sisters who don't understand how that information came to be, or are not given at least some form of history or some form of breadcrumbs to follow. So they believe that the information originates and ends with the person who teaches them, because they are confined within a particular constraint of consciousness. That is not me. I'm about breaking ceilings. And I don't care where I get the information from, because I know it all originates from one source. So I'm saying that with love and respect. And I'm going to say this for maybe about the next 3 to 4, maybe to 7 tapes or dissertations that I do, so that when these tapes are disseminated, it is understood that Dr. Malachi York does not hold a complete and total hold over the information that the brother disseminates, and that we share a common path. Check? All right. Give thanks. Now I want to use that as a segue into defining and giving a more rounded perception to why it is I wanted to speak about how it is we are being taught today, and how this so-called miseducation system got its beginning in the first place, and why it is that the system of ignorance has been so successful. I have some materials here that deals with the education system that is currently the education system used in the United States of America. This system is a derivative of the Prussian system of education. Prussian being the German system of education. Now, when the Prussians lost to Napoleon, the generals found that the reason why they lost wasn't because they weren't good soldiers. It was because everybody was thinking for themselves. Everybody was too well educated. They didn't know how to follow orders. So after that, the brainwaves and the elite, the aristocracy, began to introduce a certain education pattern to the next generations. They began to limit or put a ceiling on causing a flourishing of intelligence. When you read too much, you begin to want to inquire more. But they set it up so well that what you do read confines you anyway, because you don't believe there's anything beyond that. Now, when they did that, they did it right before the Industrial Revolution. And it was slick, because what they did was they limited the education context so that they could make good workers in the steel mills. When somebody only knows steel and how to pour this or folds this and don't have anything beyond that particular intellectual constraint, he makes a good slave. Now, using the basic philosophy, and this comes from the Prussian-German education system, mind control. Using the basic philosophy prescribed in the duties of the state, combined with John Locke's view, which is in 1690, that children are a blank slate, and lessons from Rousseau on how to write on that slate, Prussia established a three-tiered education system that was considered scientific in nature. It began around 1807, and the system was in place by 1819. Now you have to listen carefully. Check the diabolical context and why it is that we are going through what we're going through today. An important part of the Prussian system was that it defined what was to be learned, what was to be brought about, or what was to be thought about, how long to think about it, and when a child was to think of something else. Basically, it was a system of thought control, and it established a penchant in the psyche of the German elite that would later manifest itself into what we now refer to as mind control. The education system was divided into three groups. The elite of Prussian society were seen as comprising 5% of the society. Approximately 5.5% of the remaining children was sent to what was known as Readschulden, where they were partially taught to think. The remaining 94% were the Volksschulen, where they were to learn harmony, obedience, freedom from stressful thinking, and how to follow orders. An important part of this new system was to break the link between reading and the young child, because a child who reads too well becomes knowledgeable and independent of the system of instruction and is capable of finding out anything. In order to have an efficient policy-making class and a subclass beneath it, you've got to remove the power of most people to make anything out of the available information. Now, I bring it back to my opening statement. Is people listening to what I'm talking about? Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not making any direct accusations, but I'm letting you understand that you can create a system or a ceiling to a person's awareness. by taking away the different outlets and the different paths that they may pursue to make their own conclusions. Once you take away certain key information from someone, give them a base of information and a ceiling or a context of information by which to operate, that's all they know. That's all they know. This was the plan, to keep most of the children in the general population from reading for the first 6 to 7 years of their lives. Well, you say, well then, Reverend Valentine, what is all this about getting our children to read? They took it to the next harmonic. What are our children given to read? Even the stuff that they're reading now that has the quote-unquote cultural context involved. It's still about teaching our children to acclimate into the system, only having some sort of pseudo-identity. It does not teach the children to drop completely out. It does not give the children the 6 and 7 different levels necessary for them to learn. It teaches them how to conform, or at least gives them another clip in the ammunition for self-awareness. But that clip runs out, because after you've taken your own culture into this system, we have not taught our children what to do when they encounter the resistance to it. Where are the support mechanisms for them to go out and flourish based upon what we're teaching them? We still have to incorporate the system that is repressing us, but this time with our own identity. They have simply refined the madness. Now, the Prussian system of reading was originally a system whereby whole sentences, now dig the deviltry. The Prussian system of reading was originally a system whereby whole sentences, and thus whole integrated concepts, were memorized rather than whole words. In this 3-tiered system, they figured out a way to achieve the desired results. In the lowest category of this system, the Volks, that means Volks means people, the Volksschlusen, or the people school, I guess, the method was to divide whole ideas, which simultaneously integrate whole disciplines like math, science, language, culture, all at once, into subjects which hardly existed prior to that time. The subjects were further divided into units requiring periods of time during the day. What does that sound like? Sound like your education system, doesn't it? Listen carefully. With appropriate variation, no one would really know what was happening in the world. It was inherently one of the most brilliant methods of knowledge suppression that ever existed. They also replaced the alphabet system of teaching with the teaching of sounds. Hooked on phonics? Children could read without understanding what they were reading, or all the implications of what they were reading. In 1814, the first American, a Mr. Edward Everett, went to Prussia to get his Ph.D. He eventually became governor of Massachusetts. During the next 30 years or so, a whole line of American dignitaries came to Germany to earn degrees. Now, degrees is a German. That's that German, that's that, what's that, Brother Morris, the secret society came out of Germany. Not even Illuminati, but called it before that. The Freemasons, we know what I'm talking about.
Hey, I just had to interrupt real quick. I just had to pause it real quick. What he's trying to say is he's trying to refer to the Skull and Bone Freemasons that originated out of Germany. Now, despite all this hype about the Illuminati was only a name taken after the Skull and Bones Freemasonry was discovered and all hell broke loose. Once the government discovered the Freemasonry in Germany called the Skull and Bones, they immediately started to slaughter them. One by one, lodge by lodge, they slaughtered them everywhere they could find them. They slaughtered them in Italy. They slaughtered them in France. They slaughtered them in Spain. They slaughtered them in Germany. But there was a small sect of the Freemason organization of the Skull and Bones that renamed themselves the Illuminati. And I know if you are a person who watched Angels and Demons, and Angels and Demons, they tell you that the Illuminati originated within Italy, but that's a misconception, and that's pretty much just a lie. Originally, the Illuminati came from Germany and was called the Skull and Bones. But during the purge by the German government, which was an ongoing thing, which is why it was such a big thing that Hitler was trying to kill these Jews. Are you understanding what I'm saying? History is not what you think it is. Even the Germans, one of their highest rank in the military one of their highest ranks in the Nazi military was what? Skull and bones. You would literally see them wearing a skull and bone pendant to let everyone know that they had reached the highest degree available. You understand? During the purge, a small group of them escaped and fled to Italy and renamed themselves the Illuminati. This is what he's getting to. This whole thing between Britain invading the Americas, the 13 colonies, that whole thing was nothing but a large Freemasonic war. That's all it was. It was a large Freemasonic war. And what he's basically trying to explain right now is the Freemasons in America who had gained their independence. In other words, had gained their own independent lodge away from the Grand Lodge of London, which was originally Oxford. That was our Grand Lodge. That was the Grand Lodge of London was Oxford. But during their Masonic war in Europe, where the Moors had lost and was forced to flee to the Americas, the Grand Lodge of London was named the Grand Lodge of our trusted Queen Marie. Not Queen Elizabeth, Queen Marie. So when the Grand Lodge of London had told the other Freemasons in America that they wanted to stop the war against the indigenous people, which is us, and was preparing to send the Prince Hall Freemasons their own Freemasonic charter. This is what started the Boston Tea Party. The Boston Tea Party was never started because of taxes. The Boston Tea Party was started because the Prince Hall Freemasons was receiving their Masonic charter from London. And along with that Masonic charter from London, they were going to be receiving a peace treaty between the two Freemasonic lodges. Feeling betrayed by the Grand Lodge of London, the Freemasons here in America turned to the Freemasonic Lodge in Germany called the Skull and Bones. And that initially is how the German Freemasons, the Nazi Freemasons of the Skull and Bones, started to infiltrate the Americas. You understand? It never really started with this war in Germany between Hitler and these so-called Jews. No, it started right here. It started with the Freemasons in America feeling betrayed by the Grand Lodge of London because they did not want to give up the land which they had stolen. You see how long this whole thing's been going on with the world trying to set everything straight, everything right again. They were supposed to then give us our reparations, which was our land, which was our this entire thing. They were supposed to have been left and returned to Europe, but because they had found free enterprise here, because they had found free liberty from the Grand Lodge of London, because they felt as though here they were untouchable, they continued the onslaught. And when the Grand Lodge of London no longer supported them and they had their backs against the wall with the indigenous people, which was us, we are the indigenous people, we were beating their ass. Go look at all those wars, the Sioux War, the Cherokee War, the Choctaw War, the damn Seminole, especially the Seminole War and the Gullah Geechee War. We were beating their ass, even with Nate Turner, even with Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman rose hell from New York to Canada. We were winning. So what they did was they started to act like they had nothing else. And they started to pretend as though they were honoring a peace treaty between us. In the midst of that peace treaty, they went to Germany and they enlisted themselves and swore fealty and loyalty to the Grand Lodge of the Skull and Bone Nazi Freemasons. That's what he's trying to explain right here. That's why this is so important, because the Nazi Freemasons taught them how to manipulate and gerrymander the system.
We'll get right to it. Horace Mann, instrumental in developing the education system in America, was amongst this group. Horace Mann was amongst the group that went over to Germany to learn the Prussian system, the three-tiered system. Those who earned degrees in Germany came back to the United States and staffed all of the major universities. In 1850, Massachusetts and New York utilized this system, as well as to promote the concept that the state is the father of the children. Hello? That's what welfare is. Horace Mann's sister, Elizabeth Peabody, Peabody Foundation. Anybody look at PBS? Okay. Peabody Foundation saw to it that after the Civil War, the Prussian system taught in the northern states was integrated into the conquered South between 1865 and 1900. By 1900, all the PhDs in the United States were trained in Prussia. This project also meant that one-room schoolhouses had to go. Couldn't have the ma and pa teaching the children anymore. Where did you hear that system before? No. Overseas, the great demon. Who's the great red demon? Russia. This is socialism. Karl Marx. Very good. One of the reasons that the self-appointed elite brought back the Prussian system to the United States was to ensure a non-thinking workforce to staff the growing Industrial Revolution. In 1776, for example, about 85% of the citizens were reasonably educated and had independent livelihoods. They didn't need to work for anyone. In 1840, the ratio was still about maybe 70%. The attitude of learn and then strike out on your own had to be broken. The Prussian system was an ideal way of doing that. One of the prime importers of the German educational system into the United States was William T. Harris of St. Louis. He brought the German system in and set the purpose of the schools to alienate children from parental influence and that of religion. Now they got the whole system in that your child can report on you if you want to put a whack on his backside. And nobody is rising up to revolt. The government just slowly takes away from you constantly, a little bit at a time, until you don't even know that you already built in a 6x6. He preached this openly, and he began creating school staffing programs that were immediately picked up by the new teacher colleges, many of which were underwritten by the Rockefeller family, the Carnegies, the Whitneys, and the Peabody family. The University of Chicago was underwritten by the Rockefellers. The bottom line is that we had a literate country in the United States before, well, they had it, before the importation of the German education system designed to dumb down the mass population. It was more literate than it is today. The textbooks of that time make such allusion to history, philosophy, mathematics, science, and politics that they are hard to follow today because the very people are not taught how to think, they are taught what to think. Now understand how diabolical this is, because the books that have the research material that we need so that we could put the missing ingredient of ourselves back into what was taken out, our children today can't read that stuff because the way the words are formed together to set 3 and 4 dimensions into your mind so that you can see yourself. The way these words are structured, you have to be educated in that other system to understand how they even hid the information. And very few brothers who are decoders, very few sisters who are interpreters have the ability to translate that information to our brothers and sisters. So if I am a decoder, it is my business to make sure that the young that I'm teaching, the young brothers and sisters who are now following in our paths, understand how they hid the information by understanding how to decode the system that was in place at the time they were hiding the information. That's why it's so easy to make anyone believe that if I stood up here long enough and started speaking from what I understood and what you, when you read, couldn't understand, it would make it look like I'm the one that's giving up all the spiritual context. It originated with me. It ain't originated with me. We have to start educating, or at least teaching, our children how to become decoders. Not just give them information to make them feel good. Not just make them think that they are gods. How did you become a god? You can walk around talking like you God, and by what you are even saying, you are causing destruction, madness. You are propagating your ignorance because you don't have the depth of study and research. And that's why I say to all my brothers and sisters who have influence over people, it is necessary to teach the people so that they understand how to teach themselves. Why do I say that? Because you see, every decoder or interpreter is actually interpreting for his or her time. And the genetic structure of the time is based upon the environment that he or she operates in. Now understand me carefully, follow me carefully. The environment wherein we operate now, all of us are operating under a genetic code that is similar, or we wouldn't be here. So that genetic code now is based upon how the environment shapes the genetics. And I'm not just talking about the physical environment, I'm talking about the internal dynamic as well as the environment of consciousness that is set by the one who is teaching. Okay? They always tell you, well, the problem is in the genes. Oh man, it's the genes, it's the genes. That's a lie. It's not the genes. It's what shapes the genes. Because scientists are only now finding out that the genes actually operate based upon how the environment dictates to the genes, so that the genes change to meet the environment. You see what I'm saying? The genes can be malleable. They can be formed. So they say, well, what's evolution? Well, evolution comes beyond or from whatever God context is set up in the consciousness in light. The light now influences the genes to change in order for that body to evolve. But the genes don't change in and of themselves. That's divine mind. So what do? You set up a precedent where you don't teach nothing but you set up a ceiling of ignorance. So now the genes, which are automatically trying to evolve by themselves, are shutting down. All kinds of diseases are coming about. And you're wondering why people are going crazy. Their minds are flipping. It's because the genes want to break free. They wanted to shape the whole new body that's going to bring in the whole new information. But the ceiling is there. The ceiling is there.
Sorry to pause again. I just wanted to put what he's saying in as simplest terms as possible, because it is very important that there is nothing in between uh, understanding and progression. Because so often do we hear something that we don't understand, and a lot of us automatically ridicule it. What he's saying is the reason why we were always the greatest inventors, we were always the sharpest people in America, the reason why we were so united, the reason why we were so vicious when it came to fighting and longevity and war itself is simple. We knew and understood who our enemy was. We knew and we understood who our enemy was. I know a lot of people are going to come to you and they're going to say, oh, black on black crime, your kids are going crazy. That is because our kids no longer know who our enemy is. They're so busy trying to survive. And that would not be a problem if they had a clear goal and what to do after they survive. That's another thing. We always had a clear goal after we survived. After we killed the slave master and we got off the plantation, we immediately went to a land where they weren't. Once we were in a land where they weren't, we immediately set up a stronghold defense. Once we set up a stronghold defense, we immediately went back and found others to try and help them escape. And then we continued the process. And we began to grow stronger and stronger, because don't forget, they are the minority in this land. They will always and forever be the minority in this land. That's why they keep on getting all these Ukrainian immigrants, all these Irish immigrants, all these Scottish immigrants, all these people from Europe to try and come over here and give them the numbers. And no matter what they do to gain the numbers, they can never have a substantial amount to be the majority in this land. We have substantially lost focus of who our enemy is and what it truly means to survive. Survival to these kids nowadays is going out, buying a PlayStation, uh, buying the freshest clothes, buying the hottest cars, shoes. They don't truly understand what it means to nation build. And every time we do try to tell them about how to build a nation, they have been programmed to disregard all tutoring from their elders. This is why segregation is so important, so we can reclaim our children's minds. So long, even if we have reparations, so long as we are in that damn system, our children will forever look at the state like the father, and these Europeans as if they are the proprietors of luxury and substance. We must segregate from these animals so that we can reclaim what was manipulated from us. It wasn't taken from us, it was manipulated from us over a long spanning time. People talk about 400 years of slavery. I'm talking about 400 years of being mind fucked. That's where we are today. Even though the damage that they have done is being repaired at a substantial rate, it is still important that we understand that we did not go through 400 years of slavery. We went through 400 years of being mind fucked, constantly being at terror, war, of manipulation for 400 years. I'm still going to go over all the land that we lost, all the cities that we built in New Mexico, all the cities that we built in California, Missouri, Texas, Washington, D.C. itself. Never forget that the original White House was right here in Montgomery, Alabama. And we built that. You understand what I'm trying to establish to you? We forget slavery. Forget slavery. Because when the truth comes out and we start demanding our reparations, they're going to admit that slavery was a lie. So fuck slavery. We need to focus on land theft and property damage. 400 years of being mind fucked has turned our children into degenerates. But what they did not count on is that because they have failed in completing the manipulation, our children are going back into a survival instinct of destruction. But as soon as we all agree on who the enemy is, we can wipe them out within 36 hours. Within 36 hours, we can wipe these humongous chimeras from the face of the earth. Just 36 hours and we can destroy them completely. That's all. That's as simple as I can put it. Our children have been programmed to want materialistic things instead of being taught how to build an entire nation devoid and separate from the humongous chimeras that have invaded our lands.
The other part of that is other decoders, which is the one that I think are the most progressive decoders that we have amongst us today, are the brothers of the Moorish nation. They are masters at decoding, because the beast has used all of his influence to hide his deviltry. And the brothers and sisters in the Moorish nation are about decoding that nonsense and using it as weapons against him, or at least as defense principles, so that we can fight a guerrilla warfare. But as it stands today, most of the brothers and sisters, not really most of them, but a few of the brothers and sisters who have the genius to decode, are not letting those brothers and sisters that they teach have the opportunity to go and decipher for themselves, to go and study inside of the words that they had studied. I have no such problem. I don't want you following me around asking me for do for you. You're going to do for yourself. And that's what I feel the great work is. Let me go one more further. The bottom line now was that part of this whole paradigm seems to originate from the idea presented in a book called The New Atlantis. You putting this down? The New Atlantis by Francis Bacon. This is in 1626, 1627. The work described a world research university that scans the planet for babies and talent. Check it. The state then becomes invincible because it owns the university and owns all of the talent. That's what talent is. If you look in the Roman things, a talent was money. So when they say you got talent, it means that you are a money-making entity. That what you do makes money. It becomes impossible to revolt against the state because the state now knows and owns everything. A reflection of this principle can be seen today with the suppression of radical and practical technologies in order to preserve state control of life and prevent evolution and independence. The New Atlantis was widely read by German mystics of the 19th century. By 1840 in Prussia, there were a whole lot of world research universities in concept all over the country, all of them drawing in talent and developing it for purposes of state power and stability. So all of your intellectual elite are given all kinds of monies and grants to maintain the system that's in place, the system of ignorance. Now, because your child represents, and the genes in your child represent the bursting forth of the new potential that you have left, in order to definitely make sure that your child is brought into the construct, they set up something known as experimental psychology. In the middle of the 19th century, Germany had developed a new concept in the sciences, which they termed psychophysics, which argued that people were in fact complex machines. It was the ultimate materialist extension of science that would parallel the mechanistic view of the universe already underway. This new view of people made more or less institutionalized in Germany, and by the 1870s, the field of experimental psychology was born. The ultimate purpose of experimental psychology was to discover the nature of the human machine and how to program it. The main proponent of this new experimental psychology in Germany was Wilhelm Wundt, W-U-N-D-T, who is today widely regarded as the father of experimental psychology. He is described by orthodoxy as having freed the study of the mind from metaphysics and rational philosophy. Freed the mind from metaphysics and rational philosophy. So there must be an irrational philosophy, brothers and sisters. Hello? If he's freeing you from one, he's obviously putting you into the other. Wundt obtained his PhD in medicine from the University of Heidelberg in 1856 and embarked on a study of sensory perception. His most famous work was Contributions to the Theory of Sense Perception. Get that work? Contributions to the Theory of Sense Perception, done in 1858. It is described by the orthodoxy as the first work of experimental psychology. In 1875, Wundt, W-U-N-D-T, was appointed to the chair in philosophy at Leipzig, where he instituted a laboratory for the systematic experimental study of experience. Check this out. He instituted a program for the systematic study of experience. That's deep. The study of experience. Back then, the phrase "get a life" was not in vogue, and evidently he didn't have much interpretable experience of his own. In 1873, he began a year-long writing project which resulted in, get this book, Principles of Physiological Psychology. Principles of Physiological Psychology, which became a classic that was subsequently reprinted through 6 editions over the next 40 years, establishing psychology's claim to be an independent science. Wundt also wrote a philosophical subjects such as logic and ethics, but as he did not describe to rational philosophy, his writings presumably yielded irrational interpretations in both areas. It is conceivable that his warped view of humanity and the universe contributed in some small way to the eventual Nazi penchant for experimenting on those they didn't like. The educational system expands. The wave of immigration, which began in 1848, combined with the visibility of revolutions taking place all over Europe, helped foster uncertainty in the public mind. Laws requiring compulsory schooling were then legislated, It was all very Hegelian. We wouldn't want the little tykes to become reactionaries, would we? He's being sarcastic. The implementation of the German educational nightmare in the United States met with some initial resistance. Now check this out. In Carnegie's hometown of Gary, Indiana, the system was implemented between 1910 and 1916. Now this is very important. Mostly through the efforts of William Wirt, the school's superintendent. It involved no academic endeavor whatsoever. It worked so well in supplying willing workers for the steel mills that it was decided by Carnegie to bring the system to New York City. In 1917, they initiated a program in New York in 12 schools with the objective of enlarging the program to encompass 100 schools and eventually all the schools of New York. William Wirt is the one who supervised that particular transaction. Unfortunately for Carnegie, and listen well, unfortunately for Carnegie, the population of the 12 schools were predominantly Jews who innately recognized what was being done and the nature of the new education system. There's no innately recognized. They knew the system. And the elite from their own came to New York. You understand? Check it. 3 weeks of rioting followed. Now you understand how change happens? 3 weeks of rioting followed, and the editorials of the New York Times were very critical of the plan. Over 200 Jewish school children were thrown in jail. The whole political structure of New York that had tried this scheme were then thrown out of office during the next election. A book describing this scenario, carefully, listen, The Great School Wars by Diane Ravitch. Listen, get these books. By Diane Ravitch. Curiously, William Wirt, check it out, William Wirt was committed to an insane asylum about 1930 after going around making public speeches about his part in the large conspiracy to bring about a controlled state of mind on certain people. He was killed 2 years later. In order to make sure that the independence of the one-room schoolhouse and the penchant for communities to hire their own independent teachers would cease. My brothers and sisters, I came from a space where it was a little one-room schoolhouse. And my mother, my father, my grandmother, my aunts, all of them knew the teacher because my aunt was the teacher. And they taught you what they wanted you to learn, not what you had to learn in order to pass and get into the next phase. You get a book called The Unseen Hand. And in that book, it tells you how the education system was systematically taken from mom and pop and put into the hands of the state. No one knew that the communist revolutions were funded from the United States. The buildup of the Soviet Union as well as Nazi Germany would also be funded later from the United States in order to get a reactionary public to bend to the will of the controlling political factions. It was a plan that worked so well in the 1920s and worked so well again in the 1950s in the psychological creation of the Cold War, providing funding for the buildup of military, industrial, and the pharmaceutical complex. The non-thinking American public never suspected a thing. Because the United States was owned by wealthy businessmen, a synthetic free enterprise system was created. A synthetic free enterprise system. They tell you it's free enterprise, but it ain't. A synthetic free enterprise system was created, and antitrust laws were passed to prevent anyone else from gaining power. So if you had a great idea, the state would own it. Because if you, that's why they're going after Bill Gates now. Check it. The white boy stumbled on something, and he's cornered the market on communication, which is what they need for the next controlling ceiling of the new paradigm. You see what I'm saying? Earlier in the century, there were no school boards in every town. Between 1932 and 1960, the number of school boards dropped from 140,000 to 30,000. Today there are about 15,000, all controlled by extensions of the Carnegie Rockefeller education complex. In 1959, with the advent of the Sputnik and the public realization that another country was ahead of us, the embarrassed educational system was forced to temporarily create a synthetic focus on science, which produced a generation, one generation, of scientists and technicians in order to resolve the apparent deficit in the public mind. That is why they are pushing you and your children to start adopting the technology of computers. You see, computers don't need to be thinking 3 and 4 dimensions. They'll have the computer learn how to think 3 and 4 dimensions. You just push a button. So now you understand why I did a preface at the beginning of this, that none of this information belongs to me. The interpretation belongs to me. The facts that I use as my base so that I may grow a flower of realization in you, so that you may use that as your base to follow back where I got mine from to get your own flower growing. That's what I'm about. That's what I'm about. Now, I had said that I'm going to start off with the habits of death. Now, what is the habits of death? Habits of death is exactly what it is that we pursue every day. We don't realize that we are in a syndrome of death. The very thought process that we use, the very actions that we unconsciously partake in are the habits of death. Let us go outside right now and look at the way they look the types of foods they put into our communities. And they have created a habit of death. There are non-foods. There's no foods in our community that you could walk out into. Everything is in a box. Were you born in a box, brothers and sisters? No. So your food should never come from a box. It should come from what nature herself gives to you. Now, the reason why we are so susceptible to disease is because we don't even walk on the dirt anymore. Do you realize that the biology of the human structure and the biology of the planet are synergistically linked in such a way that the mother continuously feeds us? But now we have blocked her. We have systematically isolated ourselves from her, and we are taking in artificial forms of agitation. This is an artificial form of agitation. This is not real light. So what does the body have to do? It has to genetically structure itself to this pathological environment that we are working in. What does that do? It then systematically limits our ability to organically interface with the properties necessary for us to establish our next paradigm. That is, Nature Mother herself. We need to go into the forest, we need to go into the nature of things and let that instrument, let that technology talk to us directly. We have lost that link. And what do we link into now? We go into the computers.
Okay, I have to pause it again. So, do you see how everything got switched to us? You understand? They had, everything is a social experiment when it comes to the skull and bone Freemasons. Everything is a social experiment. Everything is. So, when the original model of this experiment was done in Germany with the Prussians. Then came the beta test with the Jews in New York. Then came the main test with us. But for it to be successful, they had to destroy our school systems. They had to destroy our school systems. So, a lot of information. Like I told you before, what you have to understand is this here in America, Turtle Island, Amexa, Ta-Nehisi, whatever you want to call this land, but this land what is the most important thing to understand is that this land is a free Mason nation. You are you hearing me? This is a free Mason nation. It was a Freemason nation in 1492 before Cristobal Columbus brought his bastardized ass over here. It was a Freemason nation before the invading forces from the Grand Lodge of London, originally being the Grand Lodge of Oxford, brought their bastardized asses over here. It was a Freemason nation before the Skull and Bone invasion of these lands, and it is a Freemason nation right now. But there is a difference between the original Freemasons and these homunculus chimeras who do nothing more than sit around and decode our old knowledge and then propagate it as if it's their own. That's all it is. George Washington was a Freemason. Abraham Lincoln was a Freemason. Every president in United States history was a Freemason except for Barack Obama. Actually, I take it back. Yes, Barack Obama was a Freemason, but he came from the Boulay House of Freemasons, which is nothing more than a bunch of house niggas. And yes, house niggas have their own Freemasonic house, and it's called the Boulay House of Freemasonic uh, literature or some bullshit like that. But what is the most important thing to understand is this is a Freemasonic nation. This has been a Freemasonic war ever since Rome rebelled against Africa. Because Rome was once a colony of Africa. It belonged to the Gallipoli Africans and the Grand Lodge of Luxor in Africa. That's what started the Berber Wars. And they said the same thing about the Berber Wars that they said about the Boston Tea Party. That it was started over taxes. That wasn't started over no damn taxes. It was started because Rome was not allowed to have their own Freemasonic house. Why? Because those bunch of degenerates was never brought to the initiation like every other Freemasonic house in the world. For you to gain your own charter, you must come here to this land. You must come here to this land. Why? Because the Grand Canyon. Go look up the truth of the Grand Canyon and you will understand why the Grand Lodge of America, the Grand Lodge of America is within the Grand Canyon. I know you all have heard the rumors that there is a pyramid in the Grand Canyon. Let's take it beyond that. There is the Grand Lodge of America inside the Grand Canyon, and that's why it's off limits. Everyone, and I do mean everyone, who is a Freemason today owes reparations and fealty to America. And not because some damn Europeans from London. Like I said, this whole thing started when Hannibal Galamonte, he lost control over Rome because his nephew, Cyprico Africanus, betrayed him. And Cyprico Africanus convinced the Romans to join him in rebelling against his uncle, and in doing so, he promised the Romans that they can have their own Freemasonic lodge and that he will tell the secrets of the Grand Lodge of Luxor. That is how all of this started. And in the future, I will be happy to break that down. Trust me, that video is coming. But don't you for a second think that Freemasonry came from Europe. It's a damn lie. Freemasonry came from right here. It originated right here. Freemasonry started right here inside these lands. This has been nothing else but a Freemason war between two old houses. And right now, one of those old houses doesn't even realize it's still going on. I'm telling you this because I know that these bastards aren't going to give us reparations. Not properly. I'm telling you this because our children right now don't know what the fuck reparations really means. Like I said, for you to truly gain reparations, you must be separated from these animals. You must have segregation because you need your own government. You need your own army. You need your own hospitals. You need your own food resource. And you need your own, shit. You need your own currency. I couldn't think for a second. 5 out of the 7 necessary principles for a nation. Why do you think? And now, if you understand that, you'll understand why these Freemasons put into the Constitution that we are 3/5 of a man. Because we are lacking the necessary things to become our own nation again. Fuck slavery. Like I said, I don't even think slavery happened the way they said it did. Because how can you have slaves and yet you are constantly fighting all these Native Americans? From beginning to end, it's been nothing but a long 400-year war between you and the Native Americans. And yet you still had the resources and funds to bring over African slaves. Who the fuck were you selling them to? What land was these damn so-called African slaves working on? If all your damn plantations kept going up in flames because the Native Americans wouldn't stop their attack. So, thank you for coming by. Thank you if you made it to this part of the video. Thank you so much for listening and for trying to gather information and for understanding why it is so important that we gain our reparations and gain segregation from these animals. And as always, just be patient and please just be at peace.
So their system is not stopping. And then finally, I want to say that we need one idea. And we're not thinking about a solution to the problem. We're dealing with all these other things, but these are diversions from the solution to the problem. And we have to start to think about a solution to the problem so that these young brothers and sisters who are here now, who are 15, 16, and 17, are not here 25 years later talking about these same problems. Now, how do I know that the white people know that we are going to come up with a solution to the problem? I know it because they have retina scans, they have what they call racial profiling, DNA banks, and they're monitoring our people to try to prevent the one person from coming up with the one idea. And the one idea is how we are going to exterminate white people, because that, in my estimation, is the only conclusion I have come to. We have to exterminate white people off of the face of the planet to solve this problem. Now, I don't care whether you clap or not, but I'm saying to you that we need to solve this problem because they are going to kill us. And I will leave on that. So we have to just set up our own system and stop playing and get very serious and not be diverted.
So not only do you have to free the land and help to liberate the rest of the planet Earth for political power again, you'll have to do it so that all humanity can once again get back on its proper course. and we can live life as it's supposed to be lived. Become more godlike. The object of this knowledge is to be a reflection of yourself in the mirror of history. And when you look in that mirror, you will see God, because each one of us are in the image of the Creator, the Ancient of Days, with the lamb woolly hair and the color of amber. And as Jeremiah said, he looked like the pitch of oven. Each one of us are reflections. When we look in the mirror, we see God. God shining forth from us. And if you truly believe in the Creator, then you know that you cannot accept a life other than the highest and the best that you can get out of it.